This video is recorded for discussion board number 1, Globalization and Capitalism. For question number 1, so the current economic status that I live in right now is a capitalist system where we have a free market and the system itself is heavily regulated by our government. As of now, the system is still running and integrated into our society. However, the trends at which regulation and market dominance are occurring seem to lead us into a direction that is not sustainable further into the future. In terms of the system benefiting me, I would say it has a duality to it. In many ways, how it's set up has allowed me to pursue things that resonate with my ambitions and goals, while at the same time, the system has acted as a barrier to those things as well. Something that I think is missing, or something that could be changed potentially, is transforming the ideology of the system, where the human condition is considered above all things. As of now, the market seems to run on an algorithm of high profitability, where lifestyle and basic human rights are taken out of the picture. This is something that is dangerous, and of course, with any change, uncomfortable for those who benefit the most from it, and needed for those who deserve basic rights. Moving on to question number 2. When thinking about capitalism, the first thing that comes to mind is a system that relies on a quote-unquote market or a productive/labor sector of society to maximize profits that then get redistributed into the society by regulation of a standing government. Of course, in an ideal world, this would be free of corruption and all members of society would have equal footing to get started with pursuing their goals and developing their lifestyles as they wish. From the NPR podcast, I felt like I related most to Vivek's perspective on capitalism. He first established how the system is transactional with other components of the market, such as the labor force, exchange of money, buying and selling goods, etc. And all of these things are necessary even to define what capitalism is in the first place. Another thing that stood out to me about Vivek's analysis is the current wealth that's generated as a result of capitalism and how the majority of this wealth is concentrated at the very top. So this seems to me one of the biggest flaws of the system. Moving into question 3. So I can't say that I entirely agree with Brian's comparison of our society's well-being compared to Louis XIV of France. I see where he's coming from in terms of us having commodities that improve many facets of our lives. However, with these wonderful things that we have now, other things have also evolved with these commodities. So with the evolvement of these other challenges, we also, have the ability to see things that cannot be placed into context with the experiences of Louis XIV during the time that he was around. So with that said, I don't think it's realistic to compare the two societies in terms of time period and what we have now and what existed back then. Another thing is Brian's argument about capitalism benefiting us. Again, it's not an idea that I see eye to eye with exactly, because of part of what I'm learning is that everyone's experience in society is unique, and what one person might experience, another might not. So for me to say that everyone as a collective benefits from a flat system is not fair to those who are on the receiving end of it, who maybe don't benefit as much as other people do. Moreover, listening and considering the nurse from New Orleans' experiences, I find myself empathizing with her because it is her experience and what she talks about is certainly valid. While I would say that her exact experience is unique to her in terms of where she works and the conditions that she's experiencing at home is not the same for everyone. I think it's undeniable to say that different strains of this experience cross other people's lives. And people do face similar challenges as the nurse has. To know that under this capitalist neoliberal system, people find their loved ones as a financial burden, it's really disappointing and significantly highlights the lack of humanity within the system. Which, as someone who has loved ones, I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to begin to see others in that light. So, with that said, I think it's something that needs to be desperately addressed. And from what we see now, unfortunately, these things don't seem to get addressed until someone at the very top experiences it. So, hopefully it will happen soon, but that's how I see it. For question number 4, I think the ideology of neoliberalism and capitalism have the best interests of people in mind, as they both want to give people the opportunity to have a standard basis. However, I think corruption is at the core of its demise and long-term ineffectiveness. In terms of my own life, I see these two things as positive when practiced correctly to raise the standard of living, for example. But in a more negative light, maybe as I begin to lean more towards the bottlenecking we see and the experiences that people have is not proportionally working for the best interest of the majority of the people. This also plays a role for people of low and moderate income in developing countries, because these are the very people who are the backbone of the system, and they are the ones who reap the least amount of benefits when they should be reaping the most, or at least a proportional amount to the work that they provide. One example of this would be the laboring sectors of countries in South America, for example, fruit companies. These are people who are allowing monopolizing businesses to run successfully and maximize profits, but do not receive nearly enough or not equitable compensation for their labor. And it is quite interesting to see just how many people are not in favor of this system, but don't really have an option to change it with major consensus unless someone with power comes in and steps in to make these changes. I definitely have the hope that it's possible to make the changes necessary that would improve the capitalist and neoliberalist system for the benefit of the people, of course. But to get started with the change, there will be a lot of resistance that needs to happen and a lot of force to push back. And as a society, I don't think we've reached nearly enough of this force to change the trajectory. This could be related to several reasons, one of them being the need to make a living. Imposing resistance can be quite a risk for people who live paycheck to paycheck. And it brings me back to the example of the nurse from New Orleans when I was thinking of that. And so then moving on to the article written by Sousa Santos, according to Santos, globalization is the interlinking of several important characteristics of our society and those around the world, including but not limited to economic, social, political, cultural, and religious, and so forth, that provide a basis or standard for the evolvement of social statuses and the creation of new states. So he argues that we need to consider globalizations rather than one globalization as a result of these social relationships being interactions involving more than one party. For example, he mentions wars and conflicts that occur worldwide or globally, but these events cannot occur with just one entity. At least another is required. And so that's why the author believes that this should be in the plural. Moving on to question number 6. The Washington Consensus, or neoliberal consensus, is a set of prescriptions that details the sort of domination of capitalist nations coming together to subscribe to a series of ideas that strengthen the ideologies of capitalism And Washington, being included in the name, has to do with the location where this establishment of ideas are sort of coming from. Looking at the global south and the global north, what this consensus effectively does is it gives dominance to the core countries in terms of enforcing and establishing standards that reflect the ideologies of capitalism and neoliberalism, whereas the peripheral countries don't necessarily have a choice or a say in what these standards are, but rather have to abide by those rules in order to continue their quote-unquote survival or success. And then for question number 7, Santos disputes the idea that globalization is linear, homogenizing, and irreversible, because it is in fact the opposite of this. It's not a simple idea by any means, and rather its complexities give rise to many divisions we see ideologically and politically. The fallacy of disappearance of the South has to do with the North and South global working under a financial system that no longer is disconnected from each other. They both contribute almost in a very equal manner. If not equal, then they both contribute to it as different parts of, as those different regions are connected to each other. And so furthermore, the ideas of the third world region, it doesn't really have a foundational meaning anymore, as it is part of the world that we are all interacting with. And it's not a separate entity that is causing a financial burden on itself. It's rather the result of, we can say, mismanagement from other regions, taking more and not redistributing in an equitable manner to those parts of the world. And so this discrepancy makes someone like myself in a more developed country look at underdeveloped countries as regions of the world that are living in conditions below the conditions that we live in developed countries, to seem as a result of poor management or leadership, when in reality the vast difference can be traced back to operations happening in interest of these same developed countries pushing these ideas of the third world countries. And then for my final question here, number 8, in my own words, I would define globalization, plural, globalization's plural, as the overarching connectedness of a series of systematic components that create and foster the development of countries we see around the world. So as a person living in a developed region, I benefit from globalizations because the integration of the economic sector, cultural sector, and technological sectors, just to name a few, I would say those are maybe the 3 most important ones, improve my worldview and improve the efficiency of lives. In other words, it increases our ability of survival as a collective human species.